Okay, let's see if we can figure out the major problem. So we'll go in here, we'll pull up some telemetry from that day. Again, if the platforms come back, you don't need stored telemetry on the ground. If it doesn't, you need it for sure. Let's go ahead and put some pictures, pretty pictures behind this information. Right now, real quick, I'm going to speak about the things I did. Automatic takeoff here, that's my second successful. They work fine. I don't need to know much more about them anymore, just a little bit. I did play with a little bit of that. Going right up through here, around to here, I played with the throttle. It sounded like it changed it, but when I went in and looked at telemetry data, I don't think so. So I've got to do a little deeper experiment on that. It came around right in here on the second one. I wagged the wings back and forth right here to see if that would pull it out of automatic takeoff. It doesn't. But it did wag the wings. I didn't try to fly it in a circle there or fly it over to here and then let the sticks go and see if it comes back and goes back into this automatic takeoff loiter, but I can do that in the future. So I would really like to know a little bit more about that wing wag that went on there. And I can show you that real quick. Let's see, where is that? That's right in. Oh, here it comes up. Let's speed this up just for a second. Zing, we'll come around the second time. Oops. I'm just going to go in real quick and make that plane big enough to see. And we'll go right back to what we're doing. We're going to come around. And then right here, you'll see the wings wag. Right there. That's where I moved the ailerons. I didn't come out of automatic takeoff, so I put it in fly-by-wire A to pull it around towards the return to home circle where I was going to do the airspeed calibration because I put a brand new airspeed and PDOT tube on it after Sunday 2 weeks ago, and it needed to be calibrated. So let's look a little more at some of that. Oh, we'll plot some telemetry parameters from the battery. This tells the most about the story. So if we go in here, right here's the crash. The rest of this battery voltage going down to terrible. 3.62 volts. It came back. It's a good battery, 7 volts, before we could find it and walk to it and pick it up and disconnect the battery. But if we move this slider to the crash, cutting off that superfluous data, if we move this to the automatic takeoff, we'll remove more of our superfluous data that messes up our calculations, and we can see up here this thinks for this much of the data the minimum voltage on the battery was 12.10. That's terrible. The mean was 14.6 and the max was 16.34. It was a fully charged battery. Okay, it decayed a little bit before I got it thrown in the air. That's fine. But you can see out here for the rest of this, what are we at here? Well, the fail-safe voltage is set at 15 volts. So to this point right here in the flight, even if it had not been in return to launch, it would have invoked a return to launch when it went below, right there. Well, there's a time period for it too. And it would have invoked return to launch. Okay, it might not have because of that, but soon when the peak is below 15 volts right in here, it would have invoked return to launch. That's when it should have been landed. But I didn't get the ground station rebooted and connected again to see what the voltage was till way out here, probably right in here. Because I didn't have a full minute between the time I saw the voltage and knew I had to land it and it hit the tree. Just didn't have enough time. This is unusual for me. If we add current to it now, And we do that same thing. We'll come up and look at our automatic takeoff here. There we go. That's close enough. We can take this data out of it up to right here. Well, fine. You can see the battery current minimum was 0.24. That's fine. That's it sitting on the ground locking up GPS satellites. The max current was 26.10. The mean current for the flight was 8.16. This airplane flies at 3. Why did the flight controller throw this much current into it? Do I have to get the airspeed calibration done and then the auto tune done and then say use airspeed sensor and this current will drop down? It won't be as radical after some of those things get set up. Is there perimeters in there where I can calm this down for speed for this particular platform and all of these current will drop? Let's look at the current during the return to launch. Of course, just a second. Of course, these high currents made voltage sags, and depending on if they're a long enough duration, they will invoke that bad battery thing. The parameter is set for sag compensated voltage, but that just means over a period of time it will ignore it. And why the current is at 22 right here, I have no idea. The current is at 10, 11, 17, 15, 7. Even the bottom is 6.7. That's way too much. Let's look at the loiter for the return to home airspeed calibration. And I don't know why. You can see it in the video. I pulled it into fly-by-wire A, did a 180 so it pointed towards us, and then invoked return to home. As soon as I did, that sucker jumped across the sky unbelievably and spiked this current again to 22 amps. Why? It didn't need to do that. And now if we run along the bottom, looking at the bottom currents, 6.1, 5.7, 5.8, 5.2. Let's look at the tops. 10, 10.3, 10, 9.3, 8. Almost 3 times what it needs to fly this thing. That battery was being drained so fast. It isn't even funny. And if we, let's see if we can move this up to that end of that fly-by-wire A. Okay, that's as close as I'm going to get it. And we move this up to the crash. About as close as I'm going to get it. The mean current for this time period I'm showing here. Whoops, you moved. This will actually take some of that 26 amp spike out of the automatic takeoff, and still the max is lower now. Instead of 26, it's 22, but averaged out over all of these readings, it's still 6.94 amps. Almost 7, twice what it takes, over twice what it takes to fly this airplane. So that's what got everything in trouble. Now you come in here and add that platform has no OSD. It has no telemetry to the radio because it's S-bus. Because when I bought it from MRO, they sent a PPM encoder with it. It's so old. They said if you want to be really futuristic, you can set it up S-bus. I did. You don't get any battery voltage back to that radio like I was talking yesterday. It was a possibility for me solving this. There's no OSD in this to tell you what the battery voltage is. The only way to know the battery voltage on this airplane is telemetry. I guess you could stick a low voltage battery buzzer in it, and if it's close enough to hear, you could also know your low battery voltage that way. Mission Planner, because the Nanotalon does not have an OSD in it, can only synthesize an OSD if you overlay its OSD it's generating from telemetry data. You can fly as if it did have an OSD in it. Then it's all wonderful. That was fine. The focusing hood, you really could see the computer well Sunday. That's put to bed. It was just the crashing. And see, in my humble opinion, that platform crashed the first time. I clicked to set it all up, and you see I went into takeoff mode here a couple of times. This telemetry doesn't start recording until you arm. That's the way I have it set. And I went into takeoff. It didn't want to take off. I couldn't figure out why. I went out of takeoff, back, and realized you didn't arm it, you dummy. So then I armed it, put it in automatic takeoff, and threw it, and it worked fine. So I don't know what I would have done differently. Well, I do. I've already made plans to do things differently from now on because the ground station is such an integral part of the hardware. If something happens with it anywhere in the flight, it's an immediate abort. Number two, you and your visual observer do not take your eyes off the platform. At the same time, we need to have better ground communications. Two, say, I'm going to take my eyes off the platform, and the other person knows they have to keep them on it until I say, okay, I can watch it with you now, and you're both watching it, and then whichever one says, I've got to do something. That'll solve that problem. The crashing ground station is solved. A new battery of more milliamp hours. It's a 4S, not as much on the C rating, but I think it's an 80C. I have no idea right now. So I think this right here, this line right here, let me take away the other one. I think this right here is where I got in trouble. That's way too much current draw. And I don't know if the current draw is going to settle down when tuning's complete. The Nanotalon has had its auto-tune, and now it has had its airspeed calibration. We need to cut out the airspeed calibration and go to airspeed use. Will that give it enough input to know that it doesn't need to run at this current? Or after that, do I need to shut that down elsewhere? Those are things to be determined. All right, guys. I still don't feel great. I had a bad night. All right. Thank you so much